Richat structure is a heavily eroded volcano in what is now modern Mauritania. And to some on the internet, it is for sure the location of Atlantis. I disagree. Firstly, because I just don't think Atlantis was ever real. I think Plato made it up.
It's an urban legend that never... not a chance.
But secondly, I think it's hard to imagine that this place is Atlantis if you look at the actual archaeology of the area. I know it's a very remote place, but there is still archaeology going on there, a lot of it. And that's what we're going to discuss today, the real, actual archaeology of the Richat structure. Joining me is the Sheriff of Google Debunkers himself, Milo Rossi, aka Mini Minuteman. You already know him, you love him. This is actually our first ever time speaking, so that was a lot of fun. He's joining me because he just made a whole video on the archaeology of the Sahara, so it's perfect timing. Let's dig into the actual archaeology of the Richat. I'm gonna hit record so we don't miss any of this magic.
Exactly. There we go.
I haven't messed up your shot there, have I, with the twist of the camera?
I think we're all good. I will say on my little audio thing at the bottom here, I'm not getting a waveform showing up. I don't know if that's good or bad.
It seems like it's coming through on mine.
On yours? Okay, that's what matters. All right, well, I think we're live then. Stefan, how's it going? We got Milo and Milo together at last.
Milo and Milo. I'm glad you made that correct pronunciation there, because I get Milo all the time.
Perfectly. Like I told you, I get Milo all the time. I always wondered who they were talking about. Guess it's you.
Yeah. You know, I have ambitions of our first video together, like starting at a coffee shop, and someone says like, coffee for Milo, and we both stand up, and then it's like...
Next one. There's one person that I've been requested to collaborate with. Probably the most is probably you.
Oh, for sure for the audience, this is a long time coming.
Yeah.
And this is literally our first conversation.
Yes.
Like,
This is it.
that's
For
the
all our
exciting
viewing
thing.
audiences, this is our first introduction, all right? You're getting this at the same pace that we are.
Yeah. By the end of it, we're totally gonna hate each other. So we'll be like, well, this isn't gonna work out at all. Yeah.
I hate that guy.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to be here with you today. So, talking about the Green Sahara and the Richat structure.
That's right.
Excellent.
That's right. Yeah. I was preparing a video on the Green Sahara when your video on the Green Sahara came out, which is just fine, of course. Absolutely fine.
Industrial espionage.
Yeah. And but I thought it would be good to talk about the Richat structure because obviously me and you, I mean you more so than me, but we dabble in that pseudo-archaeology, that sweet pseudo-archaeology.
And boy,
And the Richat structure always comes up. And when it comes up, literally no one ever mentions the archaeology of that region.
Yeah.
So
I feel like, obviously you're the one kind of delving deep into the Richat structure right now, but I feel like whenever I hear it brought up, obviously it's in, reference to Atlantis or some long-lost civilization, and it seems like the only, evidence for it being Atlantis is the fact that it looks like concentric circles, which is, what one of the descriptions of Atlantis is. Would you think that this really is the remnants of the most advanced civilization to ever walk the earth or whatever? There'd be a little more than just natural looking stone features in, a semi-unusual pattern. I feel like they'd be pointing to, columns and metalworking and stuff like that, but I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Yeah, it's so different to the description of Atlantis that even if they found a civilization here, how do you know that's the one that Plato was talking about?
Yeah.
Because it's different in so many ways.
Also,
it's not an island, it's...
Yeah, it's also not underwater. Wasn't that the whole thing about Atlantis is it was lost to the sea? I feel like the desert is about as far away from being under the ocean as you can get.
Yeah, I looked it up, I think it's about 500 miles from the ocean. So for sea level to have risen and drowned the Richat structure, there would be evidence all over the world of sea level rise that wiped out 500 miles of land. Yeah. So let's just say I'm skeptical that this is Atlantis, for sure.
Absolutely, to say the least. That being said, though, there is evidence of human habitation there.
Yeah, I was surprised. Yeah, obviously, of course, I have to concede the Sahara is not as archaeologically well known as virtually every other region on the planet. You can it's a hot, dry place to be. It's politically unstable very frequently. So I was surprised when I was like, oh, but still there is literally hundreds of archaeological sites documented.
Yeah. Despite that, it's the thing about looking for the long-lost civilization of any type is when you are hypothesizing that there is something with that amount of power and prestige and scope and scale, and you're not finding any evidence for it. Like, it's not even like, oh, we found this one site that's like way crazy compared to how old it is. It's like, there's nothing. Like, we're finding hunter-gatherer camps literally everywhere, and there is not a spear point from this civilization.
Yeah, it's true. And like, if it existed, it was just a larger than average Neolithic village. Like, that's what we're looking for here, like a slightly larger than average Neolithic village.
I think that's also kind of the frustrating thing is the Atlantis story is like, who isn't captivated by it? But like, we've almost lost the ability to actually kind of look at it critically because of how much of like a gospel it has become, you know? Like where the same people who are claiming like, to be really reverent of like ancient storytelling and like really like look at, what the truth might be in it are taking this as 100% fact, and it doesn't really feel like there's any interpretation for it to be a Neolithic village, which, as someone who, studies archaeology and understands the power and importance of storytelling, I believe that there could be some root to that story.
Pensé que había salido porque Pepo estaba en la puerta.
No, porque quiere salir.
Ah, pero estaba así como
Está
esperando.
haciendo piquete.
Ah.
Sí, lo hace todos los días.
¿Qué vas a preguntar?
Tiene toda la cara llena de, ¿viste? De cicatrices.
Sí, aquí se le llenó.
Bueno, bueno eso, porque se le hizo como parche caliente, pero por lo menos no se le infectó.
Vamos a poner una máscara, Pepo. Así que no está mala ópera.
Sí.
Vamos a poner una máscara. Ya, te queda hermoso.
Bueno, por eso digo que te saliste. ¿Vas a tocar? ¿Vas a tocar?
Quiero ver si me sale acá la zona.
Okay.
Somewhere far back. Even if it was a larger than average Neolithic village. But it doesn't seem like the discussion around that is around that. It seems like it's more about finding the Atlantis.
Yeah, it has to be like all or nothing. Like, I'm perfectly willing to concede that oral history could go back to the early Neolithic period. I've made videos on oral history, arguing that oral history can go back that far, but it just has to, there has to be some element of this is a hidden truth. I don't know, like it has to be this all or nothing lost civilization. I suppose the people who are into that aren't interested in finding a larger than average Neolithic village. I don't know, because it doesn't rewrite history, it doesn't change everything.
Yeah, it's all about, I think that they don't really take into account the true extent of hyperbole when it comes to repeated storytelling. Every ancient story that has been morphed and twisted over time has turned into something larger than life, and it involves gods and huge battles and like massive, colossal change in the world, even if it stemmed from something that was pretty local, and that's just the nature of it. So it's funny to listen to people kind of hypothesize that Atlantis is exactly one for one what is described in Plato's story when they will, talk about how there's shreds of truth in other ancient stories,
Yeah, like the part of Plato's story, like everything about Plato's story can be questioned. Like maybe the date was this, maybe the location was this, but the one thing that can't be questioned was this an all-powerful advanced civilization?
Yeah.
That's the one thing that can never be questioned.
¿Ya está?
Do you ever feel
No,
like
era para que
on
te
the
diga,
internet
¿no?
sometimes
Que lo que pasa es que
you get
estaban
an
ordenando el
incomplete
piano de
picture,
arriba,
or you
como
don't
es
get full
el piano de
picture?
acá, por ejemplo.
There's
Entonces, ¿por qué mañana me va a tocar tocar un piano?
Por eso.
Absolutely.
Entonces, caché, ya caché como el estructura. Tengo
Okay,
que
well,
partir
this video is
de...
sponsored by
Lo veo acá.
Ground
Así
News.
como, sí, como sí.
Claro.
¿Cachai? Y en la otra disposición no lo fabrica más. Así que ahora.
Athlete.
Ya te voy a colgar ropa ahora y más ratito de
Sensational nonsense is everywhere on the internet. That's the entire thing we're talking about today. Sensational nonsense. It spreads.
Y de repente llegó a la
It's
pieza
a
y
huge problem. Ground is trying to fix that
Sí, sí.
problem.
Oye,
by
te
giving you
interrumpo.
No,
a
igual esto va a estar por
data-driven
horas.
approach to the news. Let me show you quickly
Y yo te
exactly
dije,
how
¿qué
it
es la
works.
pieza? Y
So I've
claro,
got
había
an article here
una
about
lluvia grandísima.
AI being
Y
used
después
to
te la pieza
identify
esférica.
NASCAR
Sí.
Y
lines.
estaba
Incredible
muy.
pattern
Me gusta
recognition. It's a
con
brilliant story, incredible.
Después se me hizo así
But
como
what
que
I
entró la
was
pieza
doing, some
mía y se
nonsense
puso a
online,
contarlo así.
of course, the
Yo no
usual
estoy.
suspects. Ground
¿Qué te
news.
pasa?
Yo iba a salir a cerrar la puerta y este se quería meter
Any
dentro de la
issue.
pieza antes de
You
que
can get an overview of who's publishing it. Of course, you have links to all the different articles. You can see who owns the media companies reporting on these issues, their political
¿Cómo lo tomas
biases.
tú así?
You can see their
Rápido,
factuality,
sin pensar
which
tanto.
is based on scores
Wow,
by
sin
3
pensar.
media monitoring services. There's truly no better way to get a broad global perspective on an issue. Obviously, we're talking about archaeology here, but it really comes in handy when we're talking politics, elections, the things that dominate our life but are fed to us by annoying algorithms showing me what I think I want instead of a broad perspective. Ground News has that broad perspective, provides more insight than any one article ever could, obviously. Maybe exposes you to some bias in your media diet, and it just helps you form a more well-rounded opinion. You want a bigger picture, you want to know the bigger picture, then I think Ground News is the service for you. They're independent, subscriber funded, but you will save 40% from the Vantage plan, which is what I have here. If you go to groundnews.com/Stefan or click on the QR code wherever it is on the screen. But yeah, thank you so much for sponsoring this video, Ground News, and for supporting content that wants to get to the facts. That's what they're about too. Let's look at the facts of what's going on in the Rishat structure. Bada bing, bada boom. Anyway, let's dig into them then. Let's dig into them. So I have emailed you a Google Drive.
Ah, I saw that, yes. Oh, okay. Theodore Monod. Whoa.
Theodore Monod. I don't expect you to know who Theodore Monod is. By any chance, do you?
I don't believe I do, no.
This guy, I also likewise had no idea before I looked into this. This guy is a #1 gangster. Now, I also don't know anything about this guy, so if he did something absolutely horrendous and cancelable by 2024 standards, I do not know. Okay, I do not know what went on in this man's personal life. But I don't mean to slander him like that, because he is an absolute legend. Get this. He has published over 700 scientific works in his lifetime. He gave his name to 30 species of insects and plants, 50 crustaceans, and several fish. I don't know how many fish, it just says several fish. This man is a prolific, I don't know, bon vivant scientist, French naturalist, archaeologist, explorer. And yeah, he went to the Rishat in the 1970s to see what was going on. Actually, first of all, let me see. In these pictures here, you can see the pictures you're looking at, except for the last one that says famous French scientist. How old do you think he is here whilst he's exploring the Rishat?
Oh man, 70?
70? Try 96.
You are kidding me.
Yeah, he was still exploring the Rishat at 96 years old.
I'm alive when I'm 96 years old.
Out now. Never mind when I'm 96.
Wow, look at him go, dude. That's awesome. With his little monocle on, that's sick.
Yeah, he's a real tough guy. Apparently, according to his Wikipedia, he was a lifelong vegetarian and animal rights activist. And once walked 600 miles through the Sahara Desert to prove he could be tough on a vegetarian diet.
Point take.
But he just seems like an absolute dude, an absolute gangster. An absolute madman.
Wow. I'm inspired by that. I want to be following in those footsteps, you know?
I know, yeah, it makes me feel kind of pathetic, to be honest.
Really.
Like,
I thought I was doing cool stuff with my life. I guess not.
no, yeah.
I walked to my mailbox this morning.
Yeah, I suppose I've still got 61 years to catch up to him. You know. So
I hate to
we'll
say
see.
that, I think we're already behind.
Yeah. But he was the first man to find.
Quilombo, ¿qué es esto?
Escape. Bring down that war once and for all. At any cost.
This is what Sauron wants!
We have been deceived. Believe me! We are stronger than he knows. Ready to fight!
Folder 2, stone tools. We'll take a look at what he found here.
Wow, beautiful. Look at those.
Yeah.
Damn.
Do you see, if you open the map, do you see the map there where it shows the Rishat really clearly?
Yeah, for sure.
So he's explored the whole thing, but it seems that a lot of these artifacts are coming from the outer rim of the Rishat,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in this northern region of the Rishat. And I've read several papers about this. This is an important time to put the caveat here. A lot of these papers are published in French. The Rishat is in Mauritania, former colony of France. France is doing the majority of the research in this region. The majority of the papers are published in French, so I had a French archaeologist translate these for me.
Excellent, okay.
So
any errors, those are on him.
any errors, those are on her. Yeah. It's, just to clarify that. And I do wonder, to be generous to people that support Atlantis, sometimes I do wonder if there is just a language barrier to this information, if I'm being generous.
Could be. The language barrier certainly wouldn't help.
No, exactly. So, but there are several French people out there in the world, and they are able to help you do these
Population of French.
things. Yeah. So, if it's possible, you know the information. One that is really interesting, it might be a good you can see when you look at an image of the Rishat, and when you look at this map too, there's clearly still water moving in and around the landscape, and it has been. Like, it's not like it never, ever rains here.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, even in the Sahara, they get precipitation, they get water. Apparently, though, the interior of the ring is almost entirely devoid of artifacts and animals, according to these French people, because it is particularly dry, even in this region.
Wow.
And they find a lot of the archaeology actually in the outer rings, just because humans and animals struggle with no water. It's kind of the thing we need.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think that this is an interesting map to look at because you can see all the little tributaries, and like you said, even though the Sahara is a desert, it does still get rain, and I think that especially, in antiquity, when there was more rain in this region, which I would imagine is probably when more of these artifacts date to, I'd imagine they probably, will date back to the African human period, or at least around then. This would be a great place to be. Again, the Richat is surrounded by a lot of open desert, and so being in a place that not only has some elevation to trap moisture, but also has sort of these valleys and channels that fresh water will flow down, will not only provide fresh water, but also all the things that come with it, plants and animals and things like that. And not only with that middle part, it's interesting that it gets less fresh water, but also, if I was someone, hunting and gathering around the Richat structure, I probably wouldn't go through the effort of crossing all of those little hills and ridges and, rough terrain to get to a part of the structure that just doesn't have anything worthwhile in it, I'd stay on the outside.
Yeah, you might pop your head up to see what's over there, but as soon as you realize, this is the place where there's no water and no animals,
yeah.
You're probably going to bounce pretty quickly. Be like, okay, I'm going back to my nice little stream where there's things I can do, things I can
And
eat.
shade too. I mean, it would be blazing hot in the sun, and just looking at the relief of this map, those kind of canyon walls on the far outskirts of the structure look like they would be pretty steep. And so, it's almost reminding me of something that we see in the American Southwest, where a lot of, kind of culture arose in very flat desert lands around, canyons and gullies and things like that, just because A, it's a place where water, has settled, and B, it does have, sort of shade and some shelter.
the main thing I think that he found in his early excavations, and I should also shout out archaeologist Robert Vernet. Is it Vernet? Another guy who has a whole blog all about the archaeology of Sahara, another archaeologist. It'll be in the description. All the sources will be in the description, so you can Google debunk me for yourself, as the Milo Rossi fans.
You were the man. Get Google debunking.
Yeah, Google debunking on me right now. But remember, it's not my fault, it's the French archaeologist's fault.
As always, blame the French.
Yeah, but yeah, they're finding a lot of what they're calling galets aménage. These are really, really primitive worked pebbles. You can see in the folder there we've got some pictures of them lying on the ground.
Yeah.
And some, detailed drawings of what's actually being found.
They are very rough.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I don't even think at first glance I'd identify those as tools. That's crazy. I would look right past that.
Yes, exactly. You look right past it. If you look at the fourth image where it shows lots of different rocks, all with the drawing.
Yeah.
This is when I was chatting to these archaeologists that study the site of Mekwi, oldest archaeological site in the world. I was asking them like, how the hell are you identifying these rocks as tools?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they've got an eye for it, but you've got to think, you can see a lot of these tools, a lot of these rocks, they're all worked on one side, so it's going and taking like chip after chip after chip after chip in a line across this rock. So, you can imagine a natural scenario where a rock is being hit on one side repeatedly.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it rolled down a hill and by chance it got hit on the same side time after time. But when you find 10 rocks like that, 20 rocks like that, 100 rocks like that, all worked in that same logical fashion, what are the odds of nature bashing 100 rocks in the same spot time after time? That's basically how they determine like how a really instantaneous size versus rock.
It's interesting kind of looking at the variation in complexity of things. Some of them have quite a bit of knapping and sharpening with a lot of different like faces, but there's other ones that look like they've just been struck like, with two like large flakes coming off.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting with these, on the one hand, you're making this sort of like chopper, you could call it, this worked pebble, but you're also getting the flake, right? And so what was one of these ancient hominins trying to do at that moment in time? Were they after a chopper? Were they after the flake? What is, it's interesting to wonder about
A thin blade,
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
So these are very different to date. As you can see, these are like this state. But probably the youngest I would imagine is the middle. Wow. 3 months.
These, do you have any sort of idea, or is there any research on, what sort of, human ancestry?
That's an interesting question. So one of the challenges in West Africa is that there are not many human remains. In fact, I don't think there are any human remains or archaic human remains from this time period.
Wow.
They all seem to be found in southern and East Africa, but we know from the tools that they're here.
Yeah.
There's just for some reason, maybe it's the conditions, maybe the fluctuation of like green Sahara to dry Sahara.
Oh,
is,
that bones. That would have been
doing
quite a
something.
few human periods then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only one that's in the Sahara is Sahelanthropus chadensis, and that's a very old human fossil, like over 4 million years. Probably wasn't them making these tools. I don't even have the skulls though, fortunately. This isn't Sahelanthropus, this is Homo habilis.
Oh, look at that.
I would imagine a hominin like Homo habilis is responsible for these, maybe some sort of early Homo erectus. But it could also be like an Australopith like Lucy. We're finding these tools older and older the more we study.
I'm looking at this fifth slide now with some of these points. These look like they're pretty notably worked down. Are these different than the points that are shown in the
Yeah. So now we've moved forward in time to what is called the Acheulean period.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
These tools, humans were using these for like over 1 million years. It's by far and away our most best popular tool we've ever come up with. Pointy rock to hold in hand.
Yep. It's not the pencil, it's not the bladed knife, it's this rock.
Yeah, this rock, pointy rock in hand. This was the tool that we loved for so long. We've been making them for so long. You can see at this point, if you compare it to the earlier choppers, we've worked out how to make a symmetrical tool for a start, which says, you know, it's probably functional. It is probably functional, but it does raise the question of, by this point in time, and we're talking probably anywhere from 1.5 million years ago down to 500,000 years ago for this, did hominids, Homo erectus, did they have an appreciation for symmetry, like form? What's going on in their brain? You can't call it art, but is it the first step towards art is an appreciation of like a symmetrical design?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, I know that's something that is, debated quite a lot is, when does art truly arise and what could be constituted as art. But, I think the thing to think about is, would there be any functional reason to have something that symmetrical? Does it make sense to make it symmetrical all the time? Are we only using one side of it? It has some of them resemble a field form, so it makes sense symmetrical design to it? Or is that something that we've done to scratch that little itch in our brain,
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I'm sure there is a functional reason why a tool should be this shape in the same way it works for an arrowhead, right? There's got to be, there's got to be some functional benefit to it coming to a point. And others, they're almost doing more as like giant choppers, almost like a modern axe would be.
Yeah.
They're trying to create one big, like cutting surface.
Yeah, that middle row and some of the ones on the bottom right really look like an axe head.
Yeah. So there's got to be a functional element to it, but again, you can't help but wonder.
They're beautiful. They're really amazing. I really like that one on the far right in the center with the stripes on it. I don't know where it's from, but I saw something
These are
recently
from the
about
Risha. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I saw something recently about a spear point that was found, and it was made out of some sedimentary rock, and it had like a trilobite or some fossil in it, and like that's another one of those questions where it's like, I assume they left it in there intentionally, like they probably broke the rock and found that and kind of sculpted the lithic around the fossil, which is pretty interesting,
Yeah, you start to get, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm sure it's appearing on screen as we speak.
It is.
You can't have, it's so hard to imagine that they didn't do that deliberately and didn't have an appreciation of stuff like that. So, I'm not saying Homo erectus made art or anything like that, but did they have like a visual appreciation for things? I think so. I think we're starting to see that evolving in our brains at this time.
Yeah, and I think that's something that it may be hard for us to see in the same way just because what we view as art is something that's so complex now. Hey, look at that guy.
So this is probably the kind of chap that's making these. This is the Takana boy, the Narioka Tomi boy.
Hey!
Yeah. He lived probably about 500,000 years after Homo habilis. You can see at that time. We've come a long way. With that increased brain evolution, is there some appreciation for the form factor? I think so.
Yeah, I believe it.
Jen, I'm going to show you a map at the end. You can probably already see it in the Google screen, but you will not believe how many of these freaking things are in the Rish app.
I know, I've been trying not to click on that one. It's very interesting.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things. Alright, last one, arrowheads. I'm sure you can see the one that I'm talking about.
Those are beautiful.
Yeah, these are called Aterian points. These, by the time we're making these, we're talking 150,000 years ago, up until, 20,000 years ago, I've read. It's difficult to date, but this is modern humans. This is anatomically modern humans making these you can see there, I don't know, these probably are not arrowheads, I would say, sorry, these are probably spearheads, I would imagine. But you can clearly see these are hafted, right? They've got that little knob at the end. There's no other way to say it. I don't know the technical terms. They've got a little knob. What's cool about these Eterian points is that they're kind of associated with out of Africa a little bit, or at least our very earliest attempts of out of Africa. I did a video on the Paleolithic in India, and they have them as far away as India, maybe about 100,000 years ago.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
We've sort of got the whole gamut of the Paleolithic here, from the very earliest stone tool production through to like Homo erectus making Acheulean hand axes, down to modern humans expanding out of Africa, expanding on a huge geographical area with hafted stone points that are much more sophisticated. Let's look at the map. Let's look at the map to see how many archaeological sites.
Holy shit.
This is how many archaeological sites, just for the Paleolithic, they have around the Rishat structure.
Wow.
Like I said, I was like, I'll count them quickly just before you pop on screen, and then I was like, oh, actually, no, I won't.
Good choice.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really interesting, about this, bringing it back to kind of the Atlantis conspiracies around this site, is not only is there extensive archaeological history at this site that is not talked about, but it is extensive archaeological history that covers literally more than 1 million years of human history. Like, it's not just like, oh, we found a few things from a long time ago, and like, there's nothing recent, so like, we don't know, it could have been here, and it just all disappears. Like, no, we have like a chronology of this site. Like, there is evidence, and it is extensive and covers a really long time span. It's all right there.
Yeah. Millions and millions of years, humans have been living around the Rishat structure. Now, I might ask myself, how come hundreds of Paleolithic sites have been found, and yet nothing from this civilization has been found? I might be inclined to ask myself that.
Whoa, you're thinking way too critically here, dude. Take it down a notch.
Yeah, and there always has to be some explanation of like, how come all these sites survived, but Atlantis never survived?
Yeah. We have million-year-old hand axes, but nothing from what was, for many years, the most advanced civilization on the world. Like,
yeah.
None of that stuff survived. You're asking too much. You just haven't found it,
Yeah, exactly. That's our troll through the Paleolithic. I want to take a brief look at rock art. But maybe now we're sort of getting into the African human
This is the
period.
human period, looking at it. Whoa, I just saw a carved stone elephant out of a rock. Look at that.
That's not from the Rishat, but this is just examples of the culture that we're talking about. But yeah, there's like a whole elephant statue in the Sahara. It's kind of crazy. Do you mind rattling off for us quickly? Why is the Sahara going dry then green then dry then green? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be because of the Milankovitch cycle. So that has to do with where the Earth kind of wobbles as it spins, and it wobbles on a cycle of about 20,000 years. So it'll the North Pole will tilt in different directions, and as that tilt happens, it affects what part of the planet is facing the sun during the perihelion, which is the closest that the Earth orbits the sun. So during the African humid period, the perihelion occurred when I think the southern side of the planet was closest to the sun. And now that that cycle has changed and the Earth is tilted again, the perihelion occurs when the sun is kind of focusing on the blast. Oh no, vice versa. The sun is now blasting the southern part of the planet during the perihelion, where during the African humid period, it was blasting on the Sahara area in the northern hemisphere. And because of that, it evaporated a lot more ocean water, which created monsoon seasons that would sweep over the continent. So even though a lot more sunlight was hitting the Sahara desert, it was creating a discrepancy in temperature. So the land would heat up a bunch, and the ocean would evaporate and make a bunch of moisture. And then as the seasons would change, it would cause huge monsoons to sweep inland and inundate most of northern Africa in monsoonal rains.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that still must be going on. Obviously, the Earth hasn't stopped wobbling, so.
Yep. Yeah, so it's on cycles. I believe that African humid periods have been occurring about once every 20,000 years, I think since the start of the last ice age. So for over, you know, 1.5 million years, I think that there's been kind of this cycle, or at least around there. I know that, I think that at the very least, I remember reading somewhere that it was like, you know, 800 African human periods or something like that estimated. So it is a cycle that, you know, humankind has probably seen for many hundreds of thousands of years, really as long as we've lived.
As we finish with the map, let's start with the map as well. These are all the sites where rock art has been recorded around the Adrar Plateau. There's quite a lot, as you can see. This isn't just one site we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And then, do you see the one I just renamed? You might have to hit refresh. Rishat Elephant.
Rishat Elephant, yes. Wow, that elephant is, he's packing.
Oh yeah. He's packing. He's got a bird on his tusk. You know, he's living life. He's living life large.
Man, wish I could be that elephant.
Yeah, kind of showing off a little bit.
Yeah, really cool if they're
So this elephant comes from the inside of the Rishat. You can see there's a gentleman hunting it, perhaps with a spear and a shield, maybe. The alternative history crowd, the pseudo-archaeology crowd, they do love this image because apparently Plato mentioned elephants in Atlantis, and they're like, well, here's an elephant in what we think is Atlantis.
Hey, you know,
and it is a cool ass picture of an elephant. I'm not going to deny them that.
It is, but look at, you know, I think the really funny thing is looking at the evidence that they give versus the evidence that they should be providing that they ignore, you know, like, okay, he mentioned elephants and there's a carving of an elephant. How about the fact that they were supposed to be more technologically advanced than Athens? Like, where's the evidence for that? I don't really give a shit if there's elephants or not, you know? Like, it's Africa, and it was rainy, of course there was elephants. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, exactly, you know.
Wow.
All this rock art has survived showing what we would expect. You know, first there's animals, and scenes of humans hunting animals, and then as the Neolithic develops and people develop agricultural and herding societies, then we get pictures of cows and people herding them and stuff like that. Exactly what we would expect in the real timeline is what we have.
Yep.
But there's no, you know, images of life in Atlantis anywhere on this Adrar Plateau.
Hey, there's that one guy with a spear.
One guy with a spear, yeah.
That's pretty good. That seems like Atlantis to me.
Advanced, yeah.
Very.
Yeah, if the definition of advanced was Neolithic village and guys with spears, then it's like, okay, yeah, Atlantis was real, yeah, it did exist.
Well, maybe that's where we're wrong. Maybe they are saying that it was just a really big Neolithic village, and we're the ones who are blowing it out of proportion.
Yeah, perhaps.
It is, man. It's funny, and you know, again, the real sort of takeaway here is the fact that this conspiracy and beating this, you know, dead horse, or I guess dead elephant, as it were, is something that really takes away from the actual archaeology of not only the Ringsdale structure, but of the Sahara and Africa as a whole. You know, I mean, it's interesting hearing a lot of the alternative history crowd talk about like how there's been no, you know, there's not enough excavation in Africa, and that's a huge, you know, injustice, which I fully agree with. I think it needs to be massively more explored. I think many parts of the world have been sort of largely left behind and need to have more excavation done at them. But then they just make stuff up. They don't talk about any of the actual excavation that has happened there. They don't talk about the massive timeline of human history at these sites and what it actually means and the evidence that we truly have. Instead, they start with conclusion and, you know, we'll just search desperately to find literally anything to support it, even if that is one carving of an elephant.
Yeah, it is annoying to focus so heavily on this carving of an elephant, albeit a very cool one, and to ignore the entire, like, cultural tradition of these artworks stretching across the Sahara. And, like, some of these are, like, genuinely incredible pieces of art. Like, I'm looking at what I think maybe you're going to see as the fourth picture. It's like a zoomed-in shot of an elephant.
A carved elephant. It's magnificent. It's beautiful.
You know, to focus on just the one announcement Plato mentioned elephants, which it's silly.
It is, and it's unfortunate because just like you said, with both the art and with the lithic artifacts, it's a whole timeline. Like, the lithics and the artwork tell a story. They show the rise of the Green Sahara. They show, how people hunted the natural wildlife that was there. It gives us a window into what the animals were like that were there. And then it shows us as the Green Sahara began to, get smaller and smaller, and people were forced into, there's carvings of cattle and goats and things like that. Like, it really tells a story. Like, the full story is there, and it's really frustrating to see people not try and, add to the story and, be able to, continue the interpretations that we have and really flesh it out further, but instead try and ignore the entire thing and pretend that they have their own story for which there's no evidence.
Yeah. It's like because Atlantis has to be this advanced thing, this information, they have to discard it in a way because it just doesn't fit, with their timeline of how they think humanity developed.
Yeah, and so the only thing they have to go off is vague descriptions in the stories and, the carving of the elephant. It's ridiculous. It really is. And it's a shame because so many of the people who are drawn to these theories are people who are genuinely interested in archaeology and history and things like that. And there is so much great information on it out there that they are not finding because there's people who make this sensationalized content that is more preying on people's interest than actually being dedicated to telling them the truth and the things that they'd actually be interested in.
Yeah, this is a great time. I'll probably have to put this caveat at the start of the video because it's the internet, and if it's possible to take something the wrong way, it will be taken the wrong way. But I'm 100% sure, me and Milo here, we're not hating on the random person who is interested in Atlantis, they didn't have an education in archaeology, blah, blah, blah. Like, of course, we also think all of this stuff is cool and amazing, and have dedicated our educational and professional life talking about it, so of course we love it. This is more directed at, the whole economy of like YouTubers and bloggers, blah, 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 who make quite large sums of money talking about this stuff and not giving people who are interested the context that these things are found in at all.
Completely. Well said.
Yeah.
And I encourage anyone listening who has entertained any of these theories to just continue digging on it, continue doing, research on it. I think that a lot of the people that peddle a lot of these theories that are fully supported talk a lot about doing your own research and things like that. And I encourage doing your own research, but doing your own research doesn't just mean listening to, the same guy who's going to just reinforce, what he already believes. And, look at all the evidence, look at all of the different sites, and look at the immense amount of research that's been done there, and you can draw your own conclusions from that.
I do have to say there's like a couple of Google Earth screenshots of sites in Atlantis. To finish off positive, for people that are really into it, they are very, very good at scouring Google Earth. And that is a legitimate technique in archaeology to find sites using Google Earth. The thing is, for this to have been Atlantis, if the idea is that Atlantis was swept away in this huge flood, then these have to post-date Atlantis. So these are, cool things to have seen from Google Earth for sure, and shout out to the people who found them. But there's no logical way that they could be Atlantis. And you hit this on the conspiracy thing.
And if the flood did wash away Atlantis, why didn't it wash away any of the Paleolithic artifacts?
Well, quite, yes. So these are, you can see one of them is called Richat triangles.
Wow. Yeah, that was
I would bet these are animal enclosures, personal.
Yeah.
Because if you zoom in particularly on the left one, you have like a round structure, which is maybe a house. And then the entrance to the enclosure is by that house. And as a triangle, I think it would funnel animals towards that opening. That's just my hunch, of course I've never been there. My hunch is that these are just animal enclosures used by the local people.
Yeah, and then that is literally just a fence. That second one, are you kidding me?
Well, the Richat enclosure?
What the hell, bro? That is just a fence.
I mean, I don't know what it is. It's hard to get a scale. And there's clearly something going on around that edge.
Yeah,
but
maybe it's a wall, like a low stone wall to keep things in, like an animal enclosure, but like there's nothing around it. Like there's no context to any of these. And there's no artifacts. Like, I fully believe that people are finding things there. And they very well may be archaeological sites. It's very possible that people built stone structures. I'm not diminishing that, but I don't think that they're Atlantis.
According to Google Earth, this thing is 72 meters across. So it's quite a large enclosure. How many feet is that? I have no idea. Americans, you have to Google that yourself.
72 meters to feet. 236 feet. That's pretty big.
It's a big enclosure. These things aren't small. But I think what's important to keep in mind is that the Rishat is a remote part of the world, but it's not devoid of human life. There were trade networks across the Sahara throughout every human period you want to mention, including the medieval period, the early modern period, and there's going to be something there. There's going to be enclosures there. But I just have to mention it because I just know if I talk about actual archaeology of the Rishat, people are going to be like, you didn't mention these 3 enclosures.
Well, grasping at straws.
It's a little bit grasping at straws,
Yeah.
Let me show you one last thing, because all of that is very well and good, Milo, but maybe we're not finding it accurate because we're the liars. We're lying, we're funded. We're keeping this information from you. I know. I'm pulling back the curtains.
Man, yeah. The Smithsonian, National Geographic, Harvard, the CDC actually is paying me for this too.
So, these screenshots here that you can see, these are from a YouTube channel called Itchy Boots. I haven't seen all of her videos, but I suspect you might like her because she was traveling Africa on a motorbike, and you're a biker yourself, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm more of a moped guy, personally. That's more my speed.
Rock on.
Yeah, I'm more of a Vespa in my fluid. Shout out to her. I don't know much about Itchy Boots, but I was looking for videos about the Rishat. She went there in her motorbike. She did have an accident in Africa and had to be flown home. So, if you're watching this, Itchy Boots, I hope you're recovering okay.
Yeah, get well soon. Ride safe.
Yeah, but she was vlogging this motorbike journey across Africa and went to the Rishat. And as you can see there, there's a screenshot of a guy with sunglasses on from the video. This is the village chief next to the Rishat. You can see the Rishat sort of peeking up behind him there, I believe. These are the people that are living in this area day in, day out. These aren't archaeologists just visiting for an expedition. And he has what is somewhat of a local museum, dare I say, shop, and you can see from this screenshot what kind of artifacts he has.
Wow. Well, I mean, that has all the hallmarks of a highly advanced civilization right there.
Yeah. Hundreds and hundreds
Pointing
of
rocks?
Paleolithic artifacts. There is some other stuff in the video. There's like a nice vase, other stuff that we might expect in the human period. Maybe there's even grinding stones behind those stone points there. That's a possibility. But if you are of this mind that archaeologists are not finding Atlantis because we're not looking for it, or we're not being funded to look for it, blah 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 blah. I would like you to consider how little the guy in this village cares about any of this, right? Like, this guy is just living there. This is where his and his people have lived for centuries, for millennia. And he's just talking to people as they're coming to visit the Rishat. And what does he have to show you? Paleolithic stone tools.
Yeah.
Paleolithic stone tools.
Do you think that someone, if you think that Atlantis, something that big, would have ruins and that are literally impossible to get? And even if the archaeologists are being paid off to cover it up, to keep you in the dark, you'd think the guy that lived there would at least have stumbled across a few of them. Unless they were just, Neolithic tools, and there was no Atlantis there.
Yeah. Like,
Maybe he's being paid. No, I think what happened, archaeologists went, destroyed all the evidence of Atlantis, bit by bit, they got every potsherd out of the dirt, filtered it, and then they let the people move back in. Placed all these artifacts.
yeah.
Trust me, we have that much power.
Yeah. That's exactly the kind of thing an archaeologist would do, yeah.
Yep.
But I just thought,
That's great. I mean, that's honestly, I'm glad you brought that up because that's an excellent, retort to the thing it always turns to whenever people get backed into a corner with actual evidence is, well, they're out to get you, or they're lying, or they're being paid off, or something like that, which is like, that's just a cop-out argument. Like, why don't you actually support what you're saying? How about that? This is a great retort to that, where it's like, no, these guys live there. If there was any Atlantis, they'd be the ones finding them, and they haven't because it's not there.
Yeah, this guy is this guy's in the Rishat every day of his whole life.
Yeah.
And he hasn't found it, guys. He just hasn't found it. He's found plenty of archaeology.
Yeah,
He has found plenty of archaeology. It's just not of Atlantis. It just isn't. Alright, well that's all I know about the archaeology of the Rishat. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Milo.
I don't know, man.
So hard for me to say Milo, I'm so used to saying Milo.
Yeah, nice person for me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Milo. It's been good hanging out with you.
Yeah.
Well,
Milo, Ruffy, and Stefan Milo.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you're doing this video, Stefan. I'm excited to see when it all comes out. And for any of Stefan's viewers, I'm Milo Ross. Check me out, YouTube, Mini Minuteman. And for any of my viewers who are watching this, subscribe to Stefan. He makes great stuff.
There you go.
Llegaron los Cloud Days de Mercado Libre. Solo por estos días, zapatillas por 90.479 pesos. Jean por 136.990 pesos. Buzo por 83.790 pesos. Compra en la app. Mercado Libre.
In the early morning hours over Gondwana, the air is calm and still. As the stars gradually fade away in the rapids.
And this is just the beginning. You just watch yourself.
We have formed an alliance. Name a kid that didn't grow up watching Indiana Jones, and we're inspired by it. I mean, we're practically sitting with them right now.
A lot of the public has been primed to distrust us, right? And so the only way to really combat that is not to go out and fight these people and debunk them. What we need to do is build a stronger online community than they have built.
Yes, lack of accountability and no accountability mechanisms in alternative media means you can just lie about everything, and it never really comes back to bite you.
If you go read Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis book, and then you go read Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods, you're going to see immediately how one is derivative of the other. When in fact, we dig down to bedrock, where we can't dig any lower.
There's a glitch to get through bedrock. How do you decide what is appropriate to place in a museum, or how do you feel about museums? I'll let you start with that one. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to a special roundtable edition at the rectangle table. I'm joined today by Flint and Milo, who have been previous guests of the show, and they are here to talk to us about archaeology, debunking, pseudo-archaeology, and other things relating to online content creation in an educational sphere while also dealing with misinformation. Welcome.
Thank you for having us back. Yeah, good to be here. I'm excited to be at this rectangular round table.
That's how we probably describe it archaeologically, too. It's curvilinear.
That's a really good joke.
Wow.
You guys are both okay? Explain the joke.
things that are linear, but they have curves to them because people don't always, they build things in a wonky way. Because, you know, people in the past were not always perfect in how they built stuff. And so we call walls linear, and they're kind of like a straight line, but they also curve.
Okay. All right, I want to ask you, now that I have both of you here, okay, I need to ask you archaeological questions I always wondered about, okay?
I don't know.
Lay it on us.
Where was Jesus buried? Why don't we have his body? No, I'm just kidding. Actually, here's a question. A lot of times there is old stuff found, and people will make the claim that these people knew how to build like concrete in a special way. They lost technology, they had a thing figured out, and lost it, and now we rediscovered it, or something like that. Has that ever been the case, that there was some building material or some type of construction thing, that there's like lost technology that for some reason 2,000 years ago people knew how to do a thing that modern people just didn't understand? Is there, yeah.
I don't know about not being able to understand it, but what you're thinking about is Roman concrete. And so the reason is that Roman concrete is actually more durable than modern concrete because it's made in a different way. They actually use volcanic soil. It's called pozzolana. And that's why Roman concrete is still around, but our concrete is never left around. We do it in this sort of modern way. It's not durable. And so it actually was a recent publication, I think just 5 years ago, that was looking into why that's the case. But I don't think that technique was ever forgotten, if you see what I mean. It's just we found a cheaper, more affordable way to do it with materials that are made rather than having to get volcanic soil.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that is kind of annoying when people talk about things being good or bad is often they will include that whether something is good or bad is a function of how easy it is to create or the cost as well. Like what's better, you know, a steak at a $200 a night steakhouse or a steak from Denny's, and it's like, well, I mean, it depends. Like a steak from Denny's is $9, so you know you get what you pay for, right? But okay, yeah, I was curious because I hear that's like a thing I hear a lot. The concrete thing was one example. I can't think of any in particular. But sometimes you go, there's a lot of buildings.
Stone cutting specifically.
Stone
I know
cutting
it
is
comes
big.
up in pseudo-archaeology all the time,
Yes.
which is like that. There's a specific block that has like a partial cut into it, and they're like, why would they have,
Is it
this
the
is
sarcophagus, the Egyptian sarcophagus?
Yeah, I think
yeah.
the TikToker talks about this a lot, and it's like, why if it takes so long to cut into, did they like cut the full way into it and stuff like that, which is like, I have no idea.
And I think that the funny argument with that one is that the argument sort of goes, you know, there's a sarcophagus where there's a cut through it and they didn't finish it. And it's like a little bit off like the guideline, and so they're like, you know, how did they make it this far before they clocked that mistake? Like if they were really doing it as slowly as archaeologists say they would, they have seen this sooner. Regardless of how stupid that is. The thing that I think is the most, you know, interesting about that is if they did have some sort of lost high technology, power tools, something like that, they could have just done the cut again. Like that's even less evidence that they would have stopped, you know? Like if I had a diamond-tipped buzzsaw, I would have just been like, all right, damn, I'm lining this thing back up, we missed that one, zing, and like, there you go, the sarcophagus is done. So when you're working on something like that, I can't speculate as to why they abandoned it. It's interesting looking at things like that because we really try to project what our modern capabilities are onto ancient people, which is just an inappropriate way of doing it because they did have different technology than we do.
And I think that's what's forgotten, is how to just do stuff in a certain way.
Yes, well
right?
said.
And so we live in this modern world and we're like, how could people move a giant block? Well, look, I work on excavations, and the people I work with, we have to move giant blocks by hand out of a trench. And I'm not a specialist in this, but I've helped pull ropes and stuff like that, and you get a team of people who know what they're doing. I'm just at it with extra hands. They know what they're doing because they move these blocks. They do it.
I have the exact same thought all the time, because I wonder, how did we ever find each other as children sometimes? Because we didn't have cell phones all the time. So like, how would you say, like, I'll see you someplace at 6, and everybody somehow would like depart their houses, and they would find each other, even though you couldn't call people. You'd like, but I remember you'd like call people's homes, like, hey, do you know like where Frank is? Like, oh, he's supposed to be at that, and then you'd like bike to people's houses. And,
triangulate.
Yeah, but, and then on a more serious note, have you ever seen, there's a YouTube channel of a guy, I'm sure he does more than just YouTube, but he has like a fascination with how to move big things.
Yeah, he's
Wallington,
great.
and there's
Yeah.
people of
Yeah,
The guy like invented like some like crazy stuff of like moving big things with perfect.
Yeah, like weights and like
that's all Wallington.
Yeah, okay,
he's great. He does a great job.
Yeah. Is there evidence that any of these types of, do we know how people moved big stuff a long time ago, or is that just harder to?
Well, it's more that there's a lot of different ways they could have done it.
Okay.
And that's also what he's demonstrated. He's demonstrated different ways they could have done it. And so there's no way to be 100% sure it's that way or this way or that way. But we know they had a lot of different possible options. And so it's a lot easier to think they used those kind of options than to jump to, they had advanced technology. And so, you know, because we know that people can move large stones, and there's ethnographic photos from like 150 years ago of, you know, groups of people that did not have advanced technology of them moving giant stones that are like 50, 60 tons. And so we know people can get this done, and there's a lot of different ways to do that.
I think that one of the things that I say a lot when talking about, especially, you know, large constructions, which is something that I experience or encounter in pseudoscience a lot, is a sort of lost, you know, technology, if ever there was one, is the ability for a bunch of people to all work on the same thing. Like, at risk of sounding kind of, cliche, like, the lost technology is teamwork. Like we don't work in a society anymore where it's, 10,000 people all coming together to do one gigantic project. Like, we all work on our own things, everyone goes to their office, and yeah, we work in an office building where you have a boss and you have colleagues and everyone's like collaborating on stuff. We absolutely still do that, but I was in Sacsayhuaman in Peru, and there's stones in it, they're absolutely massive, and I was even hearing guides like spouting pseudoscience about magnets and things like that. And I can see when you look at those, it is hard to wrap your head around how that happened, but you have to remember that this was a project that the community was dedicated to. They found a way to do it, and the proof is the stone is right there, they did move it. And an interesting thought that I had while I was there, and this is kind of, this is a little bit more speculative, but as far as kind of putting out options of okay, well, we don't know exactly how they did it, but they clearly did, so what are some logical options? I saw a video back a few months before I went to Peru, and it was of some highway department in the middle of the U.S., and they were replacing a bridge overpass. So there's a road that goes over a highway, and the way that they did it was they built the new bridge a little ways down the highway next to it, so they could still have that pass running. They didn't have to demolish it and rebuild it. And then in one night, they demolished that bridge and slid the whole new bridge apparatus over using dish soap. They put dish soap on the ground, and it reduced the friction enough that it's now we can and they still have machinery, obviously it wasn't a bunch of dudes putting their back into it, but they slid it across. So when I was in Peru and we were talking about some of these sites, one of the really cool building materials that they would use, this was really present at Ollantaytambo, was they had terrace farms, and they would pack between the stones with mud mixed with llama fat, which became somewhat water resistant, so the water would sort of run off it instead of eroding the stones out. And llama fat, you can put your hand between the stones and it's still kind of oily on your hands. And I'm I don't think that, oil alone would be enough to move one of these big stones, but I'm it's an example of just work smarter, not harder. If you